I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech JP Morgan 2025 edition, and I'm here with a man who knows adversity and challenge quite well, Rick Modi. Born in Kenya, 17 years in Kenya. Then he decided to come to the United States of America. This is a story we're going to hear very shortly. His decision to come to the U.S. and earn his degree in pharmacy. And then launch a career in life sciences leading up to his leadership now at Affinia Therapeutics, where he serves as CEO. So we're going to get right into that story. We're here, by the way, at the offices of Alston & Bird in partnership with Alston & Bird. And I'm very thankful to Alston & Bird, very reputable law firm in the biotech space. If you have any needs for legal advice in biotech, Alston & Bird is the place to be. So check them out. But yeah, we're here, and I want to start right there. Like, I want to hear the story about what led up to your decision to come to the U.S. and earn a pharmacy degree in Iowa. Tell me.
Sure, Matt. So first, thank you for having me here as a guest. Very humbled to be here. Pleasure to meet you. The story is very, very interesting. So I was born in Kenya. When people meet me, by the way, said, you don't look Kenyan. Like, what is your heritage? I'm Asian Indian by heritage. Okay. Kenya is a British colony in those days. There were a lot of Indians that they brought to Kenya to do work, and they stayed over and started shops and had families that kids like me at the time. Mm-hmm. So spent 17 years in Kenya. Amazing just journey living in a third world country. People talk about survival of the fittest. Physically, this is survival of the fittest because you end up getting malaria and you survive it. It's survival of the fittest because there's not enough room in the next classroom. And if you are not, working hard enough, you get cut out pretty quickly. Yeah. But I always wanted to get into the medical field. It was pharmacy, physician, those types of careers. And I looked up, I get many people in these third world countries look up to the US and say, wow, great education, land of opportunity. So I would have this vision and want and desire to be in the US. The pharmacy school in Iowa was one of the top 5. So that's how I ended up choosing Iowa. It was also one of the cheaper cost of living. And for somebody coming from a third world country to a very well-developed first world country, cost of living is a major factor. Yeah. So I got admitted in January in Iowa. So Kenya is on the equator. Beautiful weather, and they use centigrade, not Fahrenheit, but which other things, but we'll come back to that at some other point. Yeah. Going from beautiful tropical weather to in the dead of winter, Iowa was one story. But I also grew up vegetarian. And I only had 2 food choices in Kenya. It was either corn or beef. You can imagine how much longer I was a vegetarian after moving to Kenya, actually. So. Yeah.
That's wild. So you talk about growing up in a third world country and then making that transition. Aside from the climate and your culinary options, were you prepared coming out of an education in Kenya to come over here? And were you educationally equipped to? Obviously you got in, but I'm just curious about the.
Sure. So the education in third world countries is actually very buttoned up. Mm-hmm. In the case of Kenya, because it was a British colony way back when, they followed the British system. So the British system has ordinary levels, advanced levels. They follow the general certificate of education, which many people in the US would not know what it is. Mm-hmm. But they are essentially examinations that place people. And to give you an idea, my high school education in Kenya gave me 32 credit units for the university in the US. So I got a leg start, a head start on that, and also gives you an idea of what the standard of education in Kenya was. You have to work your tail off, to be honest, in a third world country, and the standards are really, really good. I was fortunate enough to also go into English speaking school, which also helped me get past TOEFL and all these other tests that you have to go to come to the US.
Yeah. What did your parents do in Kenya?
Mom was a stay-at-home parent. My dad was in the banking sector. And when I tell people in the US who are in the banking sector, they think, oh, investment banking. No, he was a banking teller and a cashier initially, and then worked his way up into the loan department and such. But they were hardworking people, made ends meet, just like hardworking people do. All right. Instilled in me work ethics, integrity, all the values, that even to this day, I look back and I'm so thankful to my parents for for imparting on me. They did fund part of my education, but the rest was classically, people that come to the US, they get a job in a lab working in the pharmacy school, which is what I did.
Yeah.
And then also, in addition to doing the pretty deep and extensive curriculum that pharmacy actually was as well. Here's some hard work. It was fun. Many people, by the way, that come from third world countries too. One of the great things about America is also it's a fun-loving place as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like every other college kid, I was had my part of fun, going down to South Patrick or like spring break and doing all the things that college kids do, and I'm probably not supposed to be doing. But that was part of the fun as well.
It's all part of the experience, yeah. Well, where did the interest in life sciences come from? I mean, your mom's a stay-at-home mom. Your dad was a bank teller in Kenya. But was it your experiences in Kenya with some of the health problems over there and diseases that Kenyans face? What was sort of the nucleus of your desire to put the work in to become a pharmacist?
Yeah, that's a good question. In some countries, such as Kenya, for example, there are some fields that are looked upon as with very deep respect. Mm-hmm. The health sciences is certainly one of them. So my initial career choice was actually becoming a physician. Yeah, help patients, do right by society, all those things. Pharmacy was my stepping stone to become a physician. And just to be very, did pharmacy and ended up having a career in pharmacy. I decided to stay put in that. And I'm very happy that I did. Eventually went back to business school actually for my graduate studies. But plan A was becoming a doctor, to be honest. And it was looked with high regard. My kids, by the way, are in their 20s right now. I have twin boys. And they, like many kids in that age, they're working right now, but also wondering, is this their end stage career? Will they switch careers? And I tell them, go and do things that you enjoy doing, and it will take care of itself. It's easier said than done.
Right.
It's easier at this point to look back and say, yeah, I should just follow my heart and do the things that I enjoy doing. Of course, in the moment, when you're debating between a first career or a pharmacist or a physician or going back to grad school for business, in the moment, those are really difficult decisions. But I look back and I say, if you work hard and go with the things that your natural strengths are, well, you should be okay. So.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old, and the pressures that they receive from every influence beyond their family, to make choices and choose tracks. It can be overwhelming to those kids sometimes. And, as dads, we sort of have to give them that safe space to say, look, we've been around and it's not all riding on the decision you make today, right? Yeah. Getting back to your career trajectory, the pharmacy to pharma transition. Tell me how that came to pass.
Yeah. So after graduating from Iowa, I came to California. We're in California right now. So I came to California and did 10 years in a hospital pharmacy line of work. It was great because it anchored me. These were patients in the ICU where pharmacists are called upon to dose antibiotics. These were babies born prematurely that pharmacists were called in to start IV nutrition. As an example, it was you were on the floor side by side with physicians and nurses and sometimes patients and guards to lend your expertise as a hospital pharmacist. It was great up to a certain point. I started getting into administration within that healthcare system. And then I began liking the business aspect of things as well, the administrative part, and some of the entrepreneurial things that also come from becoming a pharmacist as well.
Was that part of your pharmacy training? Like when you were in pharmacy school, is there a fair degree of we're going to equip Dr. Modi to become potentially an independent pharmacist, or we're going to teach some business?
A little bit, I would say, but not that much. The most of the curriculum is geared towards science.
Yeah,
I'll say the thing that I learned the most, both from pharmacy school as well as the decade as a working hospital pharmacist. They call it SOAP, SOAP. It's an acronym that physicians use quite a bit when they evaluate patients. So the S is for subjective assessment, the O is for objective assessment, the A is for assessment itself, and then you plan. Many people in the business world sometimes draw an analogy between the business situation and a patient. The treatment, is worse as an example, right? It's a benefit risk as an example for a decision you're making. Those were the skills that I would say that I learned a lot more that were more applicable to the business world. But it was very similar in that sense. You take metrics that are non-quantitative, very subjective. You add metrics that are very objective, quantitative, and then you make an assessment in that plan. It's a very analytical field, the pharmacy field.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the skills that helped me. But more than anything, I would say was more transitioning from many people with a technical expertise start growing up in the ranks and then end up being in a businessy type of role.
Mm-hmm.
I began a second love in that second part of the business world, right? And that's where I got compelled enough to say, wow, wouldn't it be great to go back to business school and get a graduate degree and do all these things that I'm seeing with new drugs in the hospital on the investigational review board, on the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee. Wouldn't be good to apply what I'm learning here into bringing these medicines from the other side, right?
Yeah. So what did that move entail? You went back to business school, right? Did you get an MBA? Is that what you did?
I did. I went to Penn with the twins that I referred to. Until at the time, they were barely not even 2 years old.
So Iowa to California to Philly.
To Philly,
Yeah.
and we sold everything. The wife was, of course, not that excited about it, but came along for the ride, as I was saying.
Yeah.
And we put the strollers on the top of the van and moved cross country. And in the next 2-ish years, year and a half, 2 years, everything was at risk, to be honest.
Full-time student?
Full time, yeah. I did. I did it the hard way. That's probably a recurring thing in my life. It was planned or not, we can do it at some point. But I did it the hard way. I quit the job. My wife quit the job. She was a working, nurse as well. And we were both essentially just living on loans and going full time. I was going full time, and she was taking care of the kids initially. So
Yeah. Wow. You have a great wife.
I would agree. We're coming up on 30 years now.
Congratulations. Yeah. So you stick it out full time at Penn, get your MBA, and then what?
Another interesting story, and it always goes back to it's never plan A, at least for me. I looked at banking coming out of business school.
Really?
That seemed like banking would be a good career. Everybody's talking about banking as a place to be. I looked at consulting because again, people with MBAs look at consulting as well. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, the opportunities that came to me weren't banking and consulting. They actually didn't. In some cases, they want to interview me. The ones that came to me were biotech and pharma.
Yeah.
And I ended up in a very small company called Centaur.
So this was still in Philadelphia?
This was still in the Philadelphia area, exactly, yeah. So thankfully, we didn't have to move again. Wow. I was happy with that part. And Centaur had just been acquired by Johnson & Johnson, and they were launching a drug, it's a biologic that is quite well known now, of course, called Remicade. But at the time, it wasn't that well known. Mm-hmm. And it was the first indication at the time, Crohn's and rheumatoid arthritis. And of course, I had done my diligence of looking at the science. But my first week was the eye-opener for me that sealed the deal on that I had made the right choice, actually. So,
and what happened in that first week?
So as happens in many of these companies, when a drug is approved, it's a big celebration. Typically in biotech and pharma, the odds are against drugs getting approved. The science meanders so many times. It's just a very, very tough and challenging upward science for business, right? With the approval of Remicade, they got the company together and did a company meeting. And as part of that company meeting celebration, which is my first week, by the way, timing for joining the company was just impeccable. Very fortunate. There was a woman on stage in her 50s, and she was a mom with 2 kids. And they wheeled her onto the stage, but she got out of the wheelchair. And her message to the company was, I was in your clinical trial as a patient who was enrolled. I've been taking Remicade, this infused biologic that you all have developed. And I can now get up, and my walking ability is improving, and I can now hold my kids. And our message to us was, thank you. And as I'm sitting on the stage, like I had no part of this. I didn't develop the drug. This is my first week. Right. But to be a part of that industry, a part of that company, a part of that journey, and being able to say like, wow, I could be a part of making such a big difference. That's what sealed the deal for me to say like, wow, if these medicines work, the effect size of somebody not being able to walk and then being able to get up and hug their children, that's a crybaby moment. So I was weeping like a baby just to be real.
Yeah, for sure. So how long did you stay with Centaur?
I was at Center for 7 years.
What was your role there?
I was on the marketing commercial side. It was great because I could take everything I learned when I was in the hospital, all the pharmacy science that I learned, all the conversations with physicians, with patients, and then the application of the business aspect of things, and then be able to educate folks and be able to also place a therapy like Remicade in the proper place, like in the treatment paradigm. That's what I believe biotech and also commercialization is about, the right patient choice, the right positioning, and for that matter, also the right education on the benefits of the risk of these products. In those 7 years, we launched Remicade in 5 different indications, out of it 6. Rheumatoid arthritis is one. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis. It was drinking out of fireworks. Literally, it was amazing learning. We made a huge difference, and we continue doing life cycle management, obviously.
Yeah. So at what point did you start to get the entrepreneurial itch? Like Centocor, Johnson & Johnson, you're a pretty established role with an established company doing commercial work for an established product. Where does this desire to move way back to the other side of that continuum in biotech come from?
Yes, sometimes I believe it's just a natural journey. For me, Centocor led to MedImmune, another biologics company. Again, MedImmune was already part of AstraZeneca. So we were a subsidiary in building out the pipeline and launching additional drugs. But in MedImmune, I started doing more corporate strategic type of initiatives, including one of AstraZeneca as well. So that's where what I would say good judgment skills became important, and more at the higher level. These are decisions about franchises, about sites, about indication selection. But it was still working through governance. It takes a long time to go through, in big companies, various governance committee meetings. And as I developed these skills more, the ability and the courage to say, I can do this in a smaller setting became more germane and more attractive. So guess what? I moved back to California for a smaller company called Intermune, all the way back, yes, in the Bay Area. And this was a company that was developing a therapy, a small molecule this time, called Esbriet, in a disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And we brought that to approval and launched that drug, and then eventually Roche acquired the company. But that company had been working on Esbriet in the past. One phase 3 trial had been positive, another one had been negative. And when I joined, they were doing the third trial to prove or disprove whether the drug would really work in this population. So I was taking significant risks. And again, I look back and I said, wow, isn't it great that we brought another therapy to patients and, ones that are in need with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. After that, I haven't looked back, no big company since then. It's been all entrepreneurial, all small companies, including obviously, since then, Avexis, and then now Affinia. Also.
Yeah. So tell me about that story. What was your exposure to Affinia that led you to the CEO chair there?
Yeah. So I think in some cases, my journey is quite typical. In other cases, it's atypical. What I mean by that is the proving grounds in big companies where skill acquisition happens is quite typical. And then the graduation from there, might not seem like graduation at the time, but the graduation from there to smaller companies, where then you start expanding your wings and get into the higher roles and bigger responsibilities, is pretty typical, and one that I have enjoyed, because when I've gone into the smaller companies, I now believe I'm anchored enough and I am courageous enough to make these decisions, right? So when I was at Avexis, we brought another gene therapy to patients called Zolgensma. These are kids with spinal muscular atrophy. We give them this one-time therapy. It's infused as an IV infusion. We give it to them shortly afterward. The disease is called floppy baby syndrome. It's heart-rending enough where many of these babies cannot really function. They never get the ability to start walking, and as such, in many cases, they can actually pass away before the age of 2. So it's one protein that's missing, the SMN protein. So with the gene therapy, we deliver using a capsid this missing gene, and the gene goes to work, and these babies are saved.
Yeah.
So being a part of that team where we brought that therapy to that patient community and being able to help those parents and help those kids, they have their own careers now.
Yeah.
Was just, it was life-saving for them and life-changing, just to be a part of that team, right? But that's also where I realized this particular technology can be useful in so many other diseases. The problem, however, is you cannot get all the different types of genes to make these types of curative benefits with the conventional capsids that are available out there. So when I left Avexis, that company was bought out by Novartis after we got the approval. A very good colleague of mine at Mothers, who's a very well-known investor with New Enterprise Associates, NEA, that I've been working with at MedImmune actually way back when, had approached me to see what I was doing, and I'd considered multiple different CEO roles. But he said, "Hey, I know a scientific leader who is in the gene therapy space and is trying to start a company. That gentleman's name is Luke Vandenberg, and quite well known. He co-invented one of the initial capsids, A89. So he introduced the two of us. It was a phone call in a lady thing. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, and we just spent talking into the evening. We met in person later that week, and he told me what he was trying to do. And I had never started a small company before, forget like a startup.
Yeah.
But I loved what he was trying to do. It was gene therapy, coming off just seeing what gene therapy could do with the kids' spinal muscular atrophy. I was hooked. And he was doing exactly what I believe the limitations of conventional capsids were. So I took the risk and I said, I'll partner with you. Haven't done a startup before ever.
Yeah.
There's no money around the table right now. Understand the science enough to realize, of course, it's got to be, a slog, as I will call it, just like everything else in science. But
sure,
we connected, and we're now 5 years out at Affinia.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's several directions we can take now, right? So you're sitting around the table and you decide that you're going to get in on this opportunity, this project, if you will, right? You'd never done a startup before. So what was job number one for you personally to say, okay, like we're going to make a company out of this. I need to X.
Yeah, it's a good question. With a startup, the first thing is, do you have the money?
Yeah.
Can you get the money? So I to just do the initial work was 6 months of work, just figuring out the strategy, figuring out the science, putting the pitches together. There's no pay in that. You're on your own.
Yeah, but you and your wife have been there before. Was she as receptive to it at this time around?
By the way, I love my wife. She still works on the nerves. So she enjoys the same things that drove me all my life. The patient interactions, knowing that we could be a part of this community, knowing that we could leave a legacy if it does work out, right? So that was again, I said the anchoring, that's the mission, that's the motivation, right? So yes, there's no pay for, a few months, but there's the hope, the conviction, and the courage to say, wow, we could do something here.
Mm-hmm.
So in those 6 months you're writing personal checks to say, I need a few more people to, get some work done. I need a facility, which you start with a shared space initially, but then you also need labs to start. So all that was initially in our personal check while we were trying to drum up, funding for what is called a seed financing, right?
Yeah.
So we started calling, on investors. I'm again very, I'll say fortunate, lucky, blessed. But some is just being there at the right time at the right place sometimes, where the prior companies and the successes that we had in bringing therapies to patients also rewarded shareholders and investors, right? So I had now followership that I could call on and say, look, this is what we're trying to do. Would you take the meeting? Let me walk you through why this particular company could be a good fit for you, right?
Yeah.
So we did that and did the seed financing initially, and then the Series A. But those were hard days, to be sure.
You said this was 5 years ago.
This was 2019.
Yeah.
And of course, you and I know also what happened in 2020, called the pandemic, unfortunately, right? So, yeah.
Our friends at Alston & Bird set us up with some amazing space to record during JPM week. The firm's national healthcare and life sciences practice has more than 100 attorneys actively involved in the healthcare industry across the full spectrum of legal disciplines. The signature strength of this practice is its ability to master complex representations that draw on the coordinated expertise of its regulatory, compliance, public policy, transactional, corporate governance, securities, FDA, biotech, IP, government investigations, and litigation practice areas. Alston & Bird represents life sciences companies and their partners in corporate stages, ranging from private to newly public to well-established, and in a variety of stages of product development from preclinical to post-approval commercial launch. Learn more at alston.com and tell them you learned about them on the business of biotech.
Yeah, I mean, pandemic aside, I was going to ask your perspective on where we were on this sort of delivery vehicle exposure in 2019. Like, there's a lot of attention being paid to delivery mechanisms for gene therapies, and how we're navigating them to the right tissues. In 2019, was it sort of early days for exploration of that, or was it in full swing?
It was a bit of both in the following ways. Conventional gene therapy was an uptick. Mm-hmm. So Avexis was acquired by a big company. There were few other Audatas was acquired by a big company, right? So there was a belief that conventional capsids would be good enough, mm-hmm. and it would be copy and paste, very, very easy.
Yeah.
Again, biotech is never easy. So there did be, at the point it was good, but it didn't last long where people realized conventional capsids will not cut it, and that developing new capsids would be the solution to that. Again, as often happens, including me, I thought developing new capsids would be easy. Mm-hmm. It was a journey. So again, it takes, you think it can be done in months. Sometimes it takes years. You think the first indication you select will be a slam dunk. Sometimes it's not the first indication, it's the second or the third choice, right? So to be able to persevere during the time, it happens in every biotech company. Maybe not the first time, but maybe the third or the fourth time. But this is biotech. The odds, unfortunately, are against drugs getting developed and getting eventually into approval.
Yeah.
So those early days was very interesting with the investor dialogues, because with some funds, the time horizon just doesn't match with what the company is trying to do and how long the science is going to take to mature. Especially when you're in-licensing something from academia into industry. You need to redo the experiments, you need to find the right indication and patient community to serve. And the translational aspect is very different than the research aspect of things.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your approach to that. Like, what's your risk aversion sort of strategy when you don't necessarily know what the market is going, especially in the you mentioned the pandemic. I mean, pandemic years were financially pretty good, at least early, right? And then everything goes crazy. So what sort of management approach to that risk has allowed you to persevere, to your point?
Yeah, I call it accumulation of experiences. As one goes through a career, or maybe life in general as well, one learns a few things about good judgment. I believe for a leader and a leadership team in particular, that's one of the best skill sets to have. How do you render good judgment when data can be conflicting about each other, right? It can be scientific data, it can be business data, it can be market economic, it can be the fundraising environment. So triangulating that back again to when I was in the hospital and using the SOAP, so the subjective objective assessment plan, is what drives the perseverance and the good data. In biotech, it's easier than, in my opinion, at least, than in big pharma, where, again, the governance bodies can be just more track. So we were able to make these calls as we recruited a great team of experts coming in, people from different companies that could have brought, again, the same people that I'd worked with before, but I chose not to. And bringing that diversity in thinking and across functions allowed us to take in stride whatever circumstances that were there. And that included the pandemic. So yes, from a financing perspective, there was more money flowing in the era. But from an operational perspective, that was really, really challenging.
Super
The people that were affected, and also for the leadership that still had to deliver during that time. So those things just came with all the prior circumstances that we have been through, that I was in through. You can then see pattern recognition. I've seen a movie like this before. Let me make some judgment calls today. Let's see how it unfolds, and then let's course correct if we need to. Right? Those were what saved the day many, many times over. Sometimes it was my experiences. Sometimes it was, my colleagues' experience, the chief scientific officer or the chief development officer, the chief business officer, the chief medical officer at the board. It was the collective that I always think is always better than the individual.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have you always been really good at maintaining emotional control in the face of challenge and adversity?
In the older days, yes. Less so in the younger days. Not to make it about demographic, but I think anchoring can come with just, and steadiness, is the other word I would use in what you're describing. Can just come from, again, when you've seen more movies, right? So you can take more things in stride. Sometimes it's not just professional experience. It can just be you had a child or somebody in your immediate family or sort of passed away. These things also just put things into context. An experiment that went bad, or somebody left the company. You're just able to put things much more in context and say, wait a minute, this is what I can control. This is what I can control. And honestly, getting emotionally distraught about it is not even a consideration, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say my younger days I was like that. Like with everybody, we do take things too hard. We are an organization, by the way, that is very open to feedback. That does take time to develop, meaning we give each other feedback. Nobody takes it personally. But I believe that actually is really important for developing an organization that continuously learns. And the feedback also provides mutual steadiness too. So if I am facing a circumstance where perhaps I'm having more difficulty to take it in stride, I have a colleague next to me who knows how I react to that same circumstance. It is going to help me have more of a steady hand in that situation, right?
Yeah.
So we look after each other, and at the end of it all, I do believe people will remember those memories, how we went through crisis and celebrations together, and how we reacted. So I do believe that's super important.